On March 11th, remember that date because you super sleuths out there are going to need to know that date for the future. But on March 11th, something happened that kind of forever changed the course of our lives. And she went really deep into the schizophrenia and was delusional and accusing me of certain things, slashing tires or sending a naked picture or stalking her or things like that I didn't do. And
Hey guys, Freedom Voice here with another video on the Mica Miller case. I wanted to do this video specifically as it relates to the whole stalking and harassment that she was reporting to law enforcement. And in this video, I want to point out also, as was mentioned in JP's message, March 11th seemed to be a turning point for both JP as well as Mica. According to what I've been able to discover. MSN reported that there was a restraining order that was put in place. And in the report, it actually states Mica's third report came after alleged incidents with John Paul on March 11th at 1 a.m. at the Springmaid Pier parking garage. According to documents date, this report was filed the same day Mica filed the motion for the restraining order. Now, I want you to notice the date and the time, March 11th at 1 a.m. All right. So, obviously, she began to initiate the restraining order. It goes on to say, on March 11th, the Horry County Police Department reports state Mica called police after finding her tire slashed with a piece of metal. It was later identified as a tire deflation device available for purchase online. She named a potential suspect, but investigators said there wasn't enough evidence to prove the man was involved. The same day, Mica reported that same suspect approached her at a gas station. She told him she did not want to speak with him. She pulled out her phone and began recording. And that brings us to this video here.
Walk away.
I'll show you the pictures.
Do you want to go to jail?
They'll be on Facebook in a few hours.
Alrighty, you'll be in jail in a few hours. Walk away.
All right, I know a lot of these details are very familiar to a lot of people watching this video, but I'm wanting to kind of bring these points out as it relates to the date, March 11th. And I think that's important because what we're going to see is a transition in the stalking from, as a result of the restraining order, from being, JP to being sort of like a community stalking or gang stalking, as I've mentioned before. Now, before we go any further, I want to go ahead and play that message that I played earlier from JP.
On March 11th, remember that date because you super sleuths out there are going to need to know that date for the future. But on March 11th, something happened that kind of forever changed the course of our lives.
It was on March 11th that Mica began to try to initiate the restraining order. It says here at the top of the screen, Mica reported she was trying to get a restraining order at the local magistrate's office because she was afraid for her life. Now, emphasis on afraid for her life. The fear was, at this point, was the emotional and mental abuse that she was enduring in her marriage. But that would transition and it would become more profound as things begin to change. Now, in several messages, obviously, we've all seen the messages online where JP talks about how he got a hold of his wife's phone and he had counted 18 people in the last 2 years that basically said, if you ever want to talk to anybody about your marriage or about anything you're going through, I'm here to listen, right? Obviously, that's a sign of stalking, in my opinion. I mean, anyone that not only puts tracking devices on their wife's car, but also goes through their phone and counts how many people are communicating with them is obviously stalking. So even though he said in his message that he never did that, it's obvious from his message that he preached at Solid Rock that he has been doing that. In addition to that, I want to point out the fact that it was around that time or shortly thereafter that as I began to see allegedly JP hired a private investigator. Now, as a result of hiring the private investigator, things began to take a very different turn. Obviously, he's no longer involved in the stalking directly, but rather the private investigator would begin to mobilize a community group or community-based group of stalkers to carry out what appear to be stalking or methods of stalking. And that's what I'm intending to show in this video. And now that brings us to the date that we all remember, April 28th, 2024, when it was announced that allegedly Mica had passed away from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Well, on that day, Mica's best friend, Charlotte, happened to be at church. And in a special report on the Robbie Harvey show, she talked about some very important details that, in my opinion, changes the game to this case.
What was the first thing he said to you?
He said, "Hey, Charlotte, are you surviving?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I have some more details for you if you want them."
And did you just find it odd that he was calling you, of all people, immediately after church?
Yes. For one, he had already told us in his weird way. But then I just felt like I would not be up on the priority list of people to be reaching out to, especially having already been told.
And I want to clarify, this was before he saw Mica's body, right?
Correct.
So after that, the conversation kind of takes a turn, and John Paul says something that I believe will break this case wide open. What is it that he said to you?
Well, I said, "Yes, sure, I'd like some more details, I suppose." And he said, "Well, she was supposed to go to work, but instead she went and bought a gun and then drove up to Lumberton. I thought she was coming to see you." And he paused there, and I just said, "No, she wasn't."
So John Paul said on the day Mica Miller died that he thought she was coming to see you.
Yep. And it honestly kind of sent a shiver down my spine because it just sounded like he was watching her.
So you believe that moments before Mica died, John Paul Miller was tracking her?
That is how it sounded, the way that he phrased it. And just knowing in the past how there have been trackers involved, and he has had a habit of stalking her. That's what it sounded like to me.
I've been in conversation with Charlotte for well over a week now, and I have asked her if she was asked to sit on the stand and testify to what she has told you. She has said absolutely.
Now, let us remember that JP had a very strong alibi. Apparently, he was at an athletic event outside of Charleston in South Carolina, while Mica was found unalived in North Carolina. So that brings up a question. How did JP know that she had gone to Dick's pawn shop and purchased a firearm? If, in fact, he had just a tracker on her, the tracker would not tell him what she purchased. I think the answer is obvious. It's through a network of organized stalkers that JP found out the information that he found out regarding the purchase of a firearm. And so this proves that the people that we saw in the pawn shop video, obviously they were watching Mica, watching her in such detail that they could sort of report back to possibly the PI, who would then report back to JP exactly what she had purchased. And then in addition to that, on May the 2nd, in a probate court hearing, it was Mica's sister, younger sister, Sierra, that reported something very interesting as it related to the stalking. I want to just focus on number 2 and number 7. It says in number 2, "I am Mica's younger sister." Number 7, it says, Mica told me that there were people following her, keeping track of where she went. She thought that Mr. Miller hired people to follow her. Mr. Miller later confirmed this during a sermon I watched. So here's a report from Mica's sister, younger sister, Sierra, where she says in a probate court hearing that indeed Mica had told her that she was being stalked, not by JP so much, but rather by people that JP hired. Now, this was signed on the 2nd of May, and then shortly thereafter, in a Fitz News report, Sierra came on and said this.
I personally was getting really just worried randomly. I thought people were following me. I was starting to get irritable and like closing all my curtains and stuff. I didn't even feel safe in my home sometimes. Any kind of window that didn't have a cover on it now has a cover on it.
Shortly before Mica passed, her last video that she put out, she talked about a cross that she had to bear. And that cross had to do with the stalking and harassment, not so much from her husband. Obviously, that was part of it. But it had to do with stalking and harassment from groups of people. This is the reason why she said she had to keep her circle small.
I've kind of had to keep my circle really small for the past couple weeks, just because I'm going through a lot and it's hard, and it's my cross to bear. It's the thing that God has put in my life to deal with, and I don't want to bring a lot of people into it. I'm so thankful to God for a strong family and the friends that God has put in my life to be there for me at this time.
So let's recap. On March 11th, the reports tell us that Mica began to initiate a restraining order against JP. And even though this restraining order was against JP, she did file in reports that she was afraid for her life. This was noted in police reports. It was noted as well in reports through news agencies. It was also around that time, now I'm not sure the exact date, but it was around that time JP hired private investigator allegedly. Now, this private investigator, obviously we don't know, I don't know the name, but I do know that it was mentioned that there was a private investigator involved. Shortly after that, Mica buys a firearm for protection. Now, the point of, I think, what is trying to be made here that I think we should all notice is that Mica purchased the firearm not so much to unalive herself. She purchased the firearm because of all of the stalking and harassment that she had been dealing with. And this was largely from people that I'm sure she didn't know. She may have recognized a lot of them, but she didn't really know them. So she felt afraid for her life even more now. Now, this brings the story to 41 Grocery and Grill. I know I did a sort of a review of this in my last video, but I want to do something again and kind of show exactly what Mica was dealing with. You'll notice as this video is going that you can see the store owner there. He's coming out and he's going to get on this bicycle. I want you to notice how everyone seems to look at Mica. Notice the store owner, he's looking at her. And I just want you to notice all of the people that notice Mica. And what you're going to see here is everyone seems to notice Mica. It's like they all have eyes on her for some reason. Now, Mica goes inside. And remember, as I said earlier in my last video, she parked out in the open, walked inside just to purchase the energy drink. When she gets inside now, you can see her there bringing the energy drink up to pay for it. And what I found interesting, and I also had to do a little digging to get some other angles of this transaction. When she goes up to pay for the energy drink, you'll notice that the cashier behind the counter there is on her phone. And I want to show you that really quickly here. You can see she takes the card from Mica, which is the same card that she used at the pawn shop. She does the transaction. And then she picks up her phone, and notice the picture on her phone. Notice she was looking at something else, but it seems as though this picture just sort of popped up on her phone. And I'm going to zoom in to that picture. And I think you can see there are three people there. It appears that there's a heavy-set African-American man, and there are two other individuals. I believe that one of the other two is Mica. Now, again, I want to show you that again. You'll see when she takes the card from Mica, you can see what's on her phone. It's almost like she's maybe shopping online or something like that. And she's going to push her phone aside. And then she does the transaction. Once she does the transaction, she hands the card back to Mica. And when she hands the card back to Mica, she takes the receipt, puts it in the cash register, and then she reaches over for her phone, and all of a sudden, this picture pops up, and then she closes it out, and she gets a phone call. Very interesting. Very fascinating. Now, meanwhile, outside, you'll notice that white truck coming up really slow on the left there. That's the tractor guy. It's interesting when you put the timestamps together, you can see that these two incidents seem to synchronize perfectly. Even though, you know, they're different cameras, they seem to synchronize perfectly. Now, I'm speeding up the video because I kind of don't want this video to be too long. You'll notice the tractor guy, he moves the tractor because he's going to pull his white truck that you just saw. He's going to pull it right up there, up under the camera. So when he gets off the tractor, you can see Mica coming out of the store. She goes to the passenger side of the car. She goes and I guess she puts the energy drink in on the seat. I'm not sure. She closes the door and goes to the porta potty. Meanwhile, the tractor guy pulls his truck up. And at this time, you can see the dark truck coming in, making a U-turn. Notice the tractor guy gets out of his truck. At this time, the store owner shows up again on the bike. He meets the store owner and they walk in together. Now, this may not seem significant and it's not really exactly what I wanted to show you. What I want to show you is that after the tractor guy and the store owner goes in the store together, in a few minutes, he comes back out. Now, before he comes back out, you can see that white car coming in. I talked about that in my last video. The white car makes the U-turn. What's interesting is it stops right when Mica comes out of the porta potty and comes into her car and gets in the driver's seat. It's like everyone seems to have eyes on Mica. That's what it appears to me. Now, if I were FBI, I would be questioning all these people. Everybody would be in my office. The cashier, the tractor guy, the guys with the black truck, the guy with the white car. Now, notice the tractor guy. He comes out. Now, this is very interesting here. He goes into the back seat of his truck. Obviously, he has 4 doors on the truck. He gets some things out, closes the door. He goes into the front, and then he walks. And when he walks, he sees Mica and stops and makes a complete turn and goes back to his truck. Notice, he sees Mica. And he just stops and turns around and he goes back to his truck. Now, what's interesting, when he goes back to his truck, he goes into the front door or the front seat. And I've looked at this many, many times. I've zoomed it in. What I see, it's not really easy to see from, because it's a very grainy, sort of distorted video. But you can see him picking up his cell phone if you really look at it. He's picking up his cell phone and he's obviously looking at it. And I believe the same thing that the same picture the cashier got is the same picture. You can see him with the cell phone in his hand. It's kind of the black object right there in the center I froze on. And then he puts his cell phone down. Now, when he closes the door, he comes out, closes the door. Watch how he looks at Mica. He looks at her as if to try to identify her. Then he looks at her again. Then he looks at her the third time. Now I want to show you. Number 1, closes the door. And he kind of sort of stares as if he's trying to identify her. Right? Then he locks his door. Then he takes a second look. And he's really trying to see if he can identify her. And then he takes a third look. Now, again, as I said earlier, if I were FBI, if I were on this case, I would be questioning all these people. One thing I want to point out is that when Mica gets out of her car, and this is something that I would say to all ladies, anybody, when you get out of your car in a transitional space, be aware of your surroundings. That guy looked at her 3 times and she had no idea that he was looking at her. Whether he was stalking her, and from a community standpoint, part of the whole gang stalking, community stalking, organized stalking, deal, or whether he would try something, to compromise her being a female, she had no idea. She was not watching him. She was not aware of her surroundings. Always be aware of your surroundings when you're getting out of your car in a transitional space. Transitional space includes at a service station, gas station, when you drive into your garage, when you drive into your driveway, be aware of your surroundings. In fact, I want to put up 7 points here that I think are important on how to travel safe. The first one, as I said earlier, is pay attention to your surroundings, especially in transitional space. Now, again, I want to show that clip when Mica gets out of her car. Notice her back is to the guy that was looking at her 3 times. And then she never did even see him. She started walking inside the store. Number 2, never travel long trips alone. Try to travel with someone, whether it be a family member, a friend, even if you have a pet, if you have a dog will see someone watching you. The next thing I want you to notice is see this lady that got out of the car. Notice how she looks at Mica. Notice how she starts walking slow and looking at Mica as well. Again, I'm just pointing this out, guys. See, if I were an FBI agent, I would be questioning these people. Notice how she's looking at Mica. She's just watching her. See? Very weird, very strange, suspicious, right? And so Mica starts pumping her gas and, she's just looking at the pump and she's looking at her car and she's looking at the pump. Again, as I mentioned earlier, be aware of your surroundings. Ladies, as well as guys, be aware of your surroundings. Anybody could be ambushed, especially in a sort of a rural area, small gas station, service station like this. It's very easy for someone to compromise your safety. Now, the tractor guy comes out. He's obviously not looking at her. He walks. At this point, he goes behind the store. Now, I want to go back to my points on how to travel safety. Point number 3, if you can, if at all possible, text your location status to a friend or family member before you leave. And you can do it real time. You can set up real time. I want to show you that. If you have an iPhone, go to your settings. Click on your settings, go to privacy, click on privacy. You see where it says location services. Make sure that's in the on position. In fact, if you click on that, you can toggle that to enable that. That sets up your location GPS through your phone, right? Then you go down to share my location. You see where it says share my location down there midway on the screen. You click on that. When you click on that, you want to share my location. You want to enable that. So you click enable. And once you do that, now you can go to any person that you text, your sister, your family, your parents. Just click on their name and you can see where it says share my location. You just, you could either do your current location and that'll just tell them where you are. Or you can do share my location. When you click share my location, you can either share for 1 hour, you can share until the end of the day, or you can share immediately. Now, if Mica had shared for the entire day, her family could know exactly where she was because it sends real-time updates. Every time you move, it comes in the form of a text, and you can see the text here. And again, these are just tips that would help you travel safe. Number 4, carry OC spray or pepper spray, palm spray, whatever you want to call it. They have some really small, nice canisters that you can buy on Amazon. They're like in the form of a keychain, and they're very inexpensive, $10. And just keep that in your hand. You never know when you may need to use it, either on a person or on an animal, perhaps a dog or something. Number 5, and this is what I do regularly, travel with a dash camera. And when you get out, keep it running. In fact, this is the dash camera that I have in my truck. They're not that expensive, but they take very good 4K video. And I usually, when I pull up to a gas station in a place where I'm not familiar, I keep my ignition on because the camera's running. And it has both a forward-facing camera and a rear-facing camera. And it's always recording. If Mica had a dash cam running, she could pick up all of those details from the tractor guy because her car is facing the tractor guy. She could even get the car behind her. And all of this could be recorded. You can archive it on your computer. You can upload it on the cloud. You can have that evidence at all times, and it's only going to help you kind of travel safe if you're going to travel. Again, this is just sort of word to the wise for those that travel, especially ladies. All right, I'm going to wrap it up here. I think we've all seen pretty much enough in this video. There's a lot more that I'd like to point out and I'd like to talk about as I look at this case, as I look at the details surrounding this case. To me, there's a lot of evidence that if I were an FBI agent, I would have a lot of details to go on, at least leads, suspicious activity. I would be questioning all of the people at the pawn shop. I would be questioning all of these people at the gas because, I'm pretty sure that they're all involved. I'm pretty sure of that. This is not normal activity. This is all orchestrated, organized stalking. That's what it is. And an FBI agent can pick up on this. They have more resources and more things to go on to be able to sort of crack this case open. So until next time, guys, like, share, and subscribe. I want to encourage you to share this video with friends and family. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care.